what? Believe it or not, me and Derek James.
I'm a fan of Wilt, so to be part of this whole storytelling and be able to go in depth, not just so much of on-court stuff, but like you said, some of the off-court stuff, his mentality, the way he thought. I know Wilt's story very much so, like everybody else, but some of this is more in depth. This is more of rhyme and reason. You know what I'm saying? A little more in depth on some of the things that we know that's on the surface. Just want the younger generation to understand that this path that we all bite off of, all the style that we all picking off of, all this script that we actually adopted ourselves, it actually came from someone, and I like to think that Wilt was our first rock star, first one to rock clothes, first one to take chances, first one to step outside of just being a basketball player, like a real live entertainer. You know what I'm saying? So this is where that cough comes from. So. Again, I'm fortunate to bring it to fruition. I hope young guys soak it up. I hope they can grab some game from it and put it in their own lives.
What's also put on the other side?
Well, I'm a research fanatic, so the research part of this was just phenomenal for me to be able to hear Wilt's family speak about him in a personal way, to get all the stories about him and Bill Russell chilling, having dinner at night before and after the games, of the real relationships, the things that really drove him, how of an entertainer at heart he was, and how much he loved Hollywood. But man, it was just countless things that just drew me to this, and I was just, again, I'm very fortunate to be part of this.
For me, I think this is a learning doc for all of us. I was born in '79, but still didn't know what Wilt Chamberlain did on and off the basketball court. Was too young to even, know what was going on. But, I'm here to observe. I'm here to learn. I'm excited about, watching this to see how dominant he was on the basketball court and who he was off the basketball court, because you don't hear too many stories of that. Every time you hear about Wilt, it's the 100 points and, the other thing that I was talking about earlier. But I want to learn more. I don't know how great Wilt handles was, but he was a big back to the basket type of dude. I couldn't guard, and that's for damn sure. But I'll take him out on the perimeter and bust his ass, though.
I think that's the real key to why this is so appealing. It gives you the person. Because really what we know about Wilt Chamberlain as a modern NBA fan is the numbers, right? I didn't see him play. I've seen some grainy footage and a few photos, right? And then other than that, the only exposure I have to Wilt Chamberlain is he's in every record book. Wilt Chamberlain this, Wilt Chamberlain that, the most this, the most that is Wilt Chamberlain. It's not giving you an idea of who the person is. It's just telling you that he accomplished a lot without even really showing you. And this documentary is so fantastic because it does both of those things. It tells you who he was as a person, which is fascinating when you think about everything he overcame, but it also kind of fills out who he was as a basketball player, which is no small thing if you're an NBA fan,
Yeah, a lot of people say he's really well in the documentary.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I think is so interesting is that, the NBA changes, right, over time. So different rules, different pace, different all of those things. And so a lot of times when someone breaks a record and they say, well, Wilt Chamberlain holds the other 5 or whatever, they'll say, well, that was a different time. That was different rules. That was different pace. That's true. But everyone in his era played with those same rules in that same pace, and he's the one who got everything. So it just makes this a more sort of fascinating look at the guy. You can know, even if you weren't a fan in that era, even if you're not old enough like me, he's the guy. He's the guy.
Yeah, I do. The list is limitless for the amount of new things you're going to learn, the amount of different things you're going to learn on and off the basketball court. I would say the things that, for me personally, that drew me and touched me the most were he has some really deep adolescent wounds that were incredibly traumatic to his personal development, his confidence, creating a stutter that created these voids that even as an adult man, he was still trying to fill these holes and trying to ultimately seek love and admiration. and you got to watch the film to see if he actually ever gets that. But it's sort of a tragic journey, you know, with like the experience he had. So that was something I didn't know. The other thing that I love is during Jim Crow times, this man was pushing to own a basketball team. And I probably can't do it justice to just talk about how revolutionary that is, but we're talking like Jackie Robinson is just breaking the color line. You know, Martin Luther King is marching for civil rights, and Wilt is telling you, I demand to be a % owner of this team. So his entrepreneurship, his business acumen was light years ahead of his time. And guys today are still trying to follow the blueprint he laid. So.
What's really was shocking for me is that that you know the basketball side, right? Those games are talked about. I've known those stories my whole life. And then we watch the footage and you read the stories that were written after the fact and you see that actually what happened in that game is far different than I thought it was. I thought I knew how Havlicek steals the ball plays out. I did not. You know, I thought that when they said, well, Wilt chokes in pressure situations, and I watch these games that they're referring to and see him score 4 points in the final minute and make no turnovers and stuff, and I'm like, wait a second, I thought I knew this, and I didn't know that. I think people who watch this are going to find out that even the basketball side that should be uncontroversial is not exactly what they thought it was, but also that the narrative around him, the loser label that he got tagged with after the UNC Kansas loss, the triple overtime loss, it really wounded him. And I didn't know the extent to which he felt misunderstood and misrepresented as the media was selling the league and selling him and Russell as the chief marketing tools of the league, that they portrayed him in a way that actually genuinely hurt him throughout his entire life, and that this film is an attempt to give him what he asked for before he died. He wanted a documentary made that would help people understand, from his point of view, what his life was and who he was. And it's quite different than what you expect it to be.
And so, you know, we're just trying to show that, like, just because you see this book and the cover is this machismo Goliath person doesn't mean that he's not sensitive, doesn't mean he doesn't hurt, doesn't mean he always is going to win, you know? So that's kind of where it came from, yeah.
It's the strategy. There'd never been a Wilt before Wilt. Throw him the ball, like he can dunk on a triple team, and then his own teammates are alienated from him, you know, because here's this new guy, and for racist reasons. He faced racism on his own team from white players who were angry that he became the superstar. Like, I didn't know any of that, but that changes all of it for me.
And finally,
oh my God, 20,000 women. I gotta hear that story, right? You know, Conan, you know, and then also I would like to see, because I felt like Bill Russell was more of an activist and Will was more like just chilling, you know, like I want to hear that aspect, you know, I want to see his thoughts, you know, I want to hear the stories, the myths, you know, he's a legend, you know what I mean? So, 100 points in a game? That's insane. Like, it's still not broken to this day, you know, so I'm excited for this, and I'm super, super excited because there's just so many stories you got to just, like, the myth, you know, you got to, like, look into. Yeah, you know, and I think this doc is going to show both sides, right? I think this doc going to really dig in, you know, and that's just good. It's good for the world to see. Wilt was a legend, you know what I mean? It was kind of like a secret, you know, like of him, you know. So I'm glad he did it. I'm glad he's a part of it, and it's just great for basketball.
Well, the problem right now with the cultural generation is Wilt Chamberlain is not being exposed. You understand what I'm saying? How could the greatest big man in basketball be a reality and the culture don't really know it? That's my problem with the NBA. I think there's so many great players that made the NBA what it is today. They could say all day, NBA came from street basketball. Yeah, but what about the players in the NBA that made the NBA what it is today? What about why the big men are getting paid what they getting paid today because of guys like Wilt? Why do those players wait 20 and 25 years to go in the Hall of Fame? And when they go in the Hall of Fame, you got the culture saying, well, who is that? Because they can't remember. It takes too long. Those guys need their flowers. The minute they make the names that they make in the NBA, Wilt Chamberlain, Oscar Robertson, those guys were the greatest ever did it.
Well, the reality is, I think when you say Wilt Chamberlain to most people, they think of the numbers. They think of 100 points in a game. They think of 50 points and 25 rebounds a game a season, or the 20,000 women. But in reality, those numbers are the least interesting thing about Wilt Chamberlain, because it's really the complexity of his persona, his political ambitions, the fact that he supported women's sports, that he was a track athlete, that he was a volleyball player, that he did movies. He was really about 40, 50 years ahead of his time. And I think he doesn't get enough credit. And one of the sources in the film says that Wilt invented, the photogenic millionaire superstar black athlete. And he did, and we'll have quite a few of them here at the premiere. And they all owe a debt of gratitude because he invented that persona back in the 50s and 60s. Well, I think one of the things that I think people will discover about this is a little bit of the vulnerability. We tend to see people like Kevin Garnett or Wilt or Shaq as superheroes and almost not human. And you forget that they have the same frailties, the same vulnerabilities. The fact that Wilt was sickly as a child, that he was, often felt awkward and out of place and an outcast, and was really, at some points in his life, wished that he wasn't, the physical imposing figure that he actually was. So you focus on all the accolades and all the achievements, and you tend to forget about the person and the frailties and vulnerabilities of being a human being.
All right, thanks.
You got it.
Yeah.
He was the original influencer. I mean, before there was social media, people followed what Wilt Chamberlain did. And, he was stylish. He was a man about town. He played hard, and he overcame a lot of obstacles, which I think people will recognize once they see this documentary, what he overcame. So it'll be good.
He was a deliberate, shy, quiet guy until you knew him. And he didn't mind being alone. He kind of liked being alone. And he liked to travel by himself as opposed to the entourage of today. He was very comfortable in his own skin. Sometimes he would drive for hours upon hours upon hours by himself across the country, all around California. And he loved tennis. So you wouldn't think that Wilt Chamberlain would love tennis, but he did. And he was big, and he was pretty good. He was always a little upset that his backhand wasn't a little bit better.
Game changer. A guy who changed the game, a guy that was dominant. I think we think of Shaquille O'Neal, but for those who are really love the game, know that it was Wilt Chamberlain was the guy who was probably the most dominant guy, and now obviously changed the way basketball's played.
Goliath, right? Like one of the most dominant, not just players, but figures. And you think about the impact of these guys that came generations before, like our era, of course, Bird, Magic, Jordan, but somebody had to pave the way for them. And that was, of course, Chamberlain, Russell, and all the greats. And Wilt means so much to the game, but so much to the culture around the game, on and off the floor. And I'm really excited to see how this plays on the big screen with all of these great basketball people in the audience. So this is exciting.